Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Program Director for Communication, Media, and Ethics here at Mid-America Christian University. I am coming to our Introduction to Computer-Mediated Communication class from Colleyville, Texas, and I'll explain the situation here in a minute with our video discussion number 2 for Intro to CMC. And we're pulling from all our main texts and readings this week. We're looking at Jane McGonigal's Reality is Broken. We're looking at Rainey and Wellman's Networked. And then for those that whether you have been introduced to Jenkins, Ford, and Green's Spreadable Media yet, you're either getting a taste for the first time of that introduction to their book, or you perhaps you just get to skim it or recall from recent memory that introduction. So anyway, this week for video discussion, I am interested in the Networked book. It's so fascinating. There's so much going on here. And one of the key themes and takeaways from chapter 2, so highly recommend, you must read this. The content is fabulous. But they are making a case, okay, the authors are making a case that that while we typically or traditionally believe that we live amidst what you call, wrong page, social groups, right? Social groups such as sort of your community leagues. They use that vintage example of a bowling league, right? Something that creates community. Of course, churches, family, and these types of groups, your work group, where you work, and so on. And while we traditionally lean on these groups, we have actually shifted in so many ways to what they call networked cultures. And so chapter 2 is all about this tension between whether or not we are occupying social groups or networked groups. And the difference has to do with not only individualism, but how digital culture plays that central role. So, for example, I'm looking at table 2.2 on page 38 of Networked, and the authors have some comparisons, lists of group-centered society versus networked individualism. Okay, and for example, group-centered society could include neighborhood community, somewhat involuntary kin, think about neighborhood groups and so on, public spaces, physical bulletin boards, and so on. And so, these are the ways in which we are physically connecting through actual groups in the physical spaces in our lives, versus networked individualism, right, being on the other end of that spectrum. Represents everything from those digital media platforms we use and so on. So this week, what we would like for you is to concentrate on making a list. We'll call it a dichotomous list, right? So some comparison and contrast here. I'm going to share that list with each other. Talk about some of the group-centered societal areas that you are involved in, maybe at some point in your life or presently, and then try to list the number of these that are now networked, or the groups that have that are exclusively networked, relying on digital media to bring the group together, right? So thus it becomes networked in that way. And just to use a couple of personal examples here, I reflected on my own group versus networked individualism, and some immediate group-centered societal norms that came to mind were family, perhaps faculty or administrative staff at MacU. Church groups, right? You have your Sunday school class, or community groups that you're close with, and even in the past, as a director of speech and debate, speech teams, right? You're physically coming together, you're traveling together, you're going to tournaments where there is on-site community taking place and taking shape. So those are some group-centered modes in society for me. However, when I think about it a little more, my familial ties, my family, rely on online kindling. There are multiple group texts that I'm regularly a part of, participant in, or observer of. For family either immediately close, even in the same community, we're digitally communicating to stay close, or family that's far away, we're using social media to connect, to reach out. Faculty administrators at work, on-site at MacU, well, we organize our meetings using digital networks. We are on the network communicating. We wouldn't organize meetings as quickly, as efficiently without those digital networks. And even when we do have some of our staff or faculty meetings, we bring in, we simulcast or sometimes utilize WebEx technologies to bring in out-of-state or off-site personnel. Now, while I do have a Sunday school group that you typically bracketed into demographically, church organization, that I noticed the trend that if you aren't also engaged in the chain emails or the Facebook groups and so on, you can become even more isolated or disconnected, even if you are linking up in person physically at the church base, right? Place of worship. And then speech teams can be also disconnected easily if they're not kindled online, right? If we don't have a social media connection, we're not talking about, follow me on Instagram or we're Facebook buddies. Not at all. But what we mean is digital communication, so that we are able to have accountability, announcements, check-ins, and so on, so that the team, the organization, can remain healthy. So those are examples that immediately come to mind of what are traditionally thought of as group-centered, but they actually have a heavy networked emphasis now. Well, other networked forms of individualism. Academic groups. As any academic group I'm a part of, a division and for regional or national conferences, or journals, regional, national, international journals. Well, these are networked groups of people from across the country and even the globe. And we must utilize digital connection, networked individualism to come together for that shared purpose. Online students, MacU, we're in an online course and setting right now, and so for you, that kind of networked individualism is a part of your student identity and a part of my faculty identity. Website coverage. All right. Anytime you write for digital journalism, media outlets, right? Anything we're consuming at that level on social media, this is networked individualism at play, and even say book publishers and that sort of thing. You're working with a publisher. I'm working with one right now on a book that's been in process for a while, and I'm communicating with people on the coast, right? Out in the Northeast, right? Occasionally talk to people on the West Coast. So this wouldn't function, right? I wouldn't have that goal processing if I didn't have those kinds of networked connections. And of course, social media we recognize as the big bad, right? Or not as to say the big bad, but the ultra mega example of digital networking and networked culture. All right, so look forward to your responses, hearing about some of the groups you are a part of, and process it a little bit. Brainstorm that out before you offer your response, and see if you can identify some groups that you feel like are basically group-centered, but may in fact also have a strong networked aspect to them. Thank you.